Hello, ready to start a new book? I am. This one is called The Christmas Quilt by Vannetta Chapman. Let's start it, okay? We'll start with the prologue. Mid-October, Mifflin County, Pennsylvania. Annie tried to quiet the nervousness in her stomach. She pressed her hand against the fabric of her new dress, her wedding dress. The fabric's bright blue color reminded her of the clear morning sky outside. From the upstairs window, she could see much of her parents' farm. The recently harvested fields, the barn, the yard, and the rows of benches where her family and friends were waiting. The lane stretched past it all and led to the road that would take her to Samuel's, to her new life. Soon she would be Annie Yoder. A light tap on the door caused her to turn. Leah peeked inside. "Can I come in?" "Yeah, I was watching out the window trying to freeze this moment in my mind." Leah joined her there, linking their arms together. 1 year younger, slightly thinner, her hair a shade lighter, they could have been sisters. Annie's brother Adam had been courting her for over a year, and already she felt like one of the family. Afraid her knees might give out, Annie sat on the bed. "What's wrong?" "You and I will be sisters soon, before the noon meal." Leah reached forward and tucked a wayward curl into Annie's cap. No matter how she pinned her hair, it insisted on escaping. Last night Samuel had confessed he had loved her the moment she'd stepped into her father's room, when she'd come home to nurse Jacob, and he had first seen her hair loose and cascading beneath her nurse's cap. "You've known this for months," Leah reminded him. "Yeah, my mind knew, but today my stomach finally understands." She ran her hand over the hand-stitched quilt covering her bed, the bed she would no longer sleep in once she was Samuel's Frau. "I'm nervous too. The crackers I had for breakfast helped. I couldn't swallow a thing." Annie studied the blue and yellow pinwheel pattern of the quilt. "Do you think these feelings are normal?" "It's the excitement. Think of all God has in store for us. It seems Adam and I have waited for so long, and I know Samuel would have been content to marry you months ago. I was so surprised when he asked me on Christmas. Today we begin our new lives." Annie smiled as a calm assurance settled her nerves. "By this time next year we could have a family of our own." "We're marrying on the same day." Leah stood and straightened her blue dress. "Perhaps we'll also share the day our babies are born." Chapter 1. 2 years later, mid-November. Annie and Leah strolled along the sidewalk, peeking in the windows of the shops, enjoying the afternoon sunshine. When was the last time we had a day that didn't include freezing temperatures and snow dusting the doorstep? Leah stopped suddenly as 2 young boys playing a game of tag ran around her. Maybe Saturday was the wrong day to come to town, though. A weekday might have been better. Annie stepped closer and scowled after the boys. Less traffic, less Kenner. "It's not their fault. I'm as big as Adam's workhorse." "You are not." "I am. Look at me." Leah rested her hands on her stomach, which was quite large. She'd recently begun her 7th month of pregnancy, but a stranger might think she was in her final week. "Belinda, I told you. Twins take up more room." "Yeah, I know. But Annie, I can't even put on my own shoes. Adam has to do it for me." Leah stuck out her bottom lip and lines formed across her forehead. Annie knew that look. Pure misery. "I should have stayed home." "You should have done no such thing. Let's go on to the general store, then stop by Ma'am's shop for some tea. Being out is good for you and the babies," says Nurse Annie. "Yes, she does." "Who is 4 months pregnant and still not showing." The smile spread across Annie's face until she was giggling. Then they were both laughing. behaving like schoolgirls, two pregnant women standing in the middle of the sidewalk and causing traffic to stream around them. 4.5 months, Annie corrected Leah, and she moved last night. Samuel and I both felt her. She, of all people, you should know better than to predict whether your baby is a girl or a boy. You're right, but Samuel seems so certain. After listening to him for 4 months, I've fallen into the habit of saying she. Annie hooked her arm through Leah's and pulled her along the sidewalk. I need to purchase the lavender fabric for the 9-patch crib quilt I'm making you, and I happen to know Rachel received a shipment earlier this week. Oh, do we have to? I'm not sure what I need today, isn't it? Oh, do we have to? I'm not sure what I need today is an encounter with Samuel's sister-in-law. I think she's mellowing, Annie whispered as they pushed their way into the general store, causing the small bell above the door to announce their arrival. Instead of answering, Leah gave her the look. It was enough. After nearly 3 years back at home, back in Mifflin County, Annie had learned to read most of the unspoken clues from her sister-in-law, packed with all of their previous conversations about Rachel. It said, if you know she hasn't changed at all, and we'll do our best to love her anyway at the same time. Annie didn't talk to many people about Rachel. Her mother, Leah, and of course Samuel. No one had the answer, but they all knew prayer was the one thing capable of healing the wounded places in Rachel's heart. Until those places mended, chances were she would remain difficult and even occasionally somewhat nasty. When they entered the store, 1,000 memories surrounded Annie. Her family had shopped at the general store for as long as she could remember, but her recollection and what her eyes saw told two different stories. The store she had visited as a child was crowded with delightful items in every available spot. Like most plain folk, Annie had learned not to covet and to appreciate what she had rather than focus on what she didn't. Growing up, the general store had been owned by Ephraim Bontrager. She remembered it clearly. It didn't prick her desires as much as it sparked her imagination. When she walked over the doorstep, she'd always imagined herself stepping into an English fairy tale. He carried supplies for Amish and English alike, so all manner of things were on his shelves. Annie's favorite spot for years had been Ephraim's book nook in the front corner near the window. Her brother Adam had loved the old-fashioned candy counter with its jars of delicious penny candy. Most of those items had vanished. 2 years ago, Rachel Zook, Samuel's sister-in-law, had moved from Ohio after her husband died. Annie knew from comments Samuel made it had not been a happy marriage. Rachel never talked about her life before moving, so Annie had no way of knowing if she was still mourning her husband or regretting that her 2 boys were being raised without the help of a father. There was a third possibility. Perhaps Rachel had fallen into a habit of discontent. She had simply shown up in Mifflin County one day. Ephraim had decided to put the general store up for sale so he could move closer to his family. Families in the community were hardly aware of Ephraim's plans. When Rachel bought the store and settled into the upstairs apartment with her boys, the store had changed. Rachel's store was clean and orderly and was stocked with items she was certain would appeal to the maximum number of customers. In other words, there were no surprises. The charm was gone. Annie had to admit the place was cleaner. "Leah, I'm surprised to see you out today," Rachel sniffed from her place behind the counter. Tall, thin, with a beautiful complexion. Only the scowl on her face would ruin. Rachel was dressed in her usual gray dress and black apron. Why the sniff? Did she have a perpetual cold, or was she suggesting they smell bad? Annie knew they didn't, but she was tempted to check. Her mind went back to a psychology class she had taken while pursuing her nursing certification during the time she lived with her auntie among the English. The psychology instructor would have had a good time with some of Rachel's mannerisms. And Annie, I thought you were helping Belinda deliver the infant to the family on the south end of our district. Though why Samuel would allow you to go scurrying around the country in your condition. Good Marie, Rachel. Annie aimed to keep her voice low and calm as if she were speaking to a child. An image of Kipton immediately jumped to her mind, but she pushed it away. Although she had letters from her former patient for 3 years, she hadn't seen him since she had left Philadelphia. She still missed the children she'd once worked with, and today wasn't a good time to focus on that loss. Today she needed to concentrate on making Leah's outing a pleasant one. I'd hardly call it a morning. Rachel stared at the clock above the register, its hands ticking toward noon. She tapped the counter with her pen as if to suggest they were late, or perhaps they were keeping her from something. Annie glanced at Leah, who rolled her eyes. The immature gesture reminded Annie of her youngest sister, Reba. She nearly started giggling again because Reba had not learned to abide Rachel's sternness. Reba insisted Rachel reminded her of the old bull out in the pasture, bad-tempered and mean. The bell over the door rang out again. This time 3 young boys entered the store, but Rachel was having none of it. "Back out you go, but not without your parents. Go and find them, and then you may come in. I don't have time to keep my eye on you. I have work to do. Now out." The boys, good boys who belonged to their church, tugged down on their hats and hurried back out the door. As they left, one murmured to the other one, "I told you she wouldn't let us come inside." Annie plastered on her brightest smile. "I was hoping to pick up the lavender fabric for the quilt I'm working on for Leah's Bopley." "You haven't finished it yet?" Rachel tisked as she maneuvered behind the cutting table and pulled out the bolt of lavender cotton. It reminded Annie of the purple flowers which grew on the south side of her vegetable garden. "Are you sure you wouldn't rather use the off-white I carry?" "Nah, this will be good. I think I'll check and see what infant things you have. Maybe there's something I've forgotten." Leah waddled off down the aisle, her hand on the top of her stomach as she went. "You shouldn't have brought her to town." Rachel made no attempt to lower her voice as she unrolled the fabric with a thump, thump, thump that seemed to echo her disapproval. "Do you honestly believe she'd be better off setting at home? She has 2 months yet before the babies are due." "She won't make it 2 more months, and both of us know it." Something resembling concern crossed Rachel's face, but when she glanced up at Annie, she blinked her eyes, and whatever had been there, whatever she'd been feeling, had disappeared. Possibly Annie had imagined it, or maybe for a moment Rachel had remembered what it was like to carry a child. Within her, Rachel's boys were older. Matthew had turned 10 this year, and Zeke was 8. The boys had adjusted to living in Mifflin County. They seemed to have adapted to life without a father. Rachel had moved to their town a year after her husband died. If there was a soft spot in Rachel's heart, it was for her boys, but she didn't show it often. Perhaps she was afraid of spoiling them. Where were Matthew and Zeke today? Samuel had reminded her to ask about them. Certainly a part of Rachel did remember the miracle of carrying a child inside for 9 months, and the hope life would turn out to be all you dreamed it could be. "How much do you need?" Half a yard will be more than enough. I can use any extra on a patchwork quilt I plan to start after Christmas." Annie watched her measure and cut the fabric. "Probably you are right about Leah making it to term, but the Bopley will come when they're ready. It's good for Leah to be out of the house, and it helps her mood, too." "Do not come in this store." Rachel paused in the middle of folding the fabric she had cut. For a moment, Annie wondered who she could be talking to. The bell over the door hadn't rung. In fact, the store was surprisingly empty for midday on a Saturday. Annie angled her head to the right. When she did, she caught sight of her two nephews. The younger Zeke was halfway through the back door. Matthew stood behind him and had his hand on the door. At the sound of their mother's voice, they both had frozen. Chapter 2. Leah had chosen a hanging bag for disposable diapers, decorated with farm animals and trimmed in lavender, blue, and green. She was walking back up the aisle when she heard Rachel's voice. It was a hard thing to miss, rather like the voice of a school teacher Leah had had in 5th grade. She'd been terrified of Sally Detwilder, a Mennonite woman who smelled like rubbing ointment and rarely smiled. But she wasn't afraid of Rachel Zook. Why were her boys standing half in, half out of the back door? They didn't seem frightened exactly, maybe disappointed. "I know you're not done with your chores." Rachel didn't bother turning around. Instead, she directed her attention to the bolt of fabric she was finished with, a lovely lavender Annie would use on the crib quilt she was sewing. "Back outside until you're done." "Yes, ma'am." Both boys reversed direction, back toward the area behind the store. Leah noticed that the older one, Matthew, was careful to catch the screen door so it wouldn't slam. What could their chores possibly be? What was there to do in the alley behind the store? She rubbed her stomach more to feel the connection with her Bopley than because they were causing her any discomfort at the moment. What was it like for the boys to live in the apartment above the store? Did they miss having a yard to run and play in? How did Rachel manage raising them alone? "I don't think you'll be needing the diaper holder since you'll be using cloth. I've had plain women try to use it for cloth diapers, and they don't fit in it well, no matter how you fold them." Rachel moved to the register to ring up Annie's fabric purchase. "Though I do not enjoy discouraging you from purchasing something, I can use every sale I scrape together in this town." Annie stopped at Leah's side as she studied the diaper holder. "Perfect colors, matches the quilt I'm sewing." "And the other your ma'am is doing." Leah smiled and released the worries being around Rachel always brought to mind. "I still have some money left over from my vegetable booth." "Yeah, your garden did much better than mine. I had that rabbit problem." They started laughing again, but stopped when they realized Rachel was staring at them. "Oh, I'm sorry, we're keeping you." Annie quickly counted out the amount showing on the register display. "Samuel wanted me to remind you about the luncheon at our house tomorrow. I couldn't possibly drive out." "Oh, Eli will be coming. He has to drive through town on his way to our place. He'll be happy to give you and the boys a ride." Rachel's face scrunched up and she began shaking her head. "Oh, I don't know. My parents would so love a chance to see the boys. I believe Dad has been working with Matthew on his checker skills." Leah watched the interplay with interest. She understood all too well the stress that existed between Annie, who was now her sister-in-law, and Rachel, who was Samuel's sister-in-law. The fact that Rachel had tried to persuade Samuel to move to Ohio and marry her should have caused an insurmountable wall of jealousy between the two, but Annie had assured her it didn't. Annie had said she and Samuel talked about everything, including the situation with Rachel. It seemed to Leah that she hardly talked to Adam at all these days. He tumbled into bed exhausted when he came to bed at all and rose before daylight. Glancing down at her stomach, which blocked the view of her feet, Leah couldn't help wondering if it was because of her size. She knew her husband loved her, but perhaps he didn't like her very much right now. Maybe things would be better between them in a few months. I suppose we could come if I didn't have to drive. I'd rather not use the mare and buggy more than necessary. Wonderful, then it's settled. Leah made her purchase without any more commentary from Rachel and was happy to see two more families enter the store as they were leaving. The last thing Annie needed was for Samuel to bear the financial responsibility of Rachel Zook and her two sons. The emotional baggage the woman had brought to town was enough of a burden. Stepping outside into the November sunshine reminded Leah of being released from a long day at school. She stopped on the sidewalk, held her stomach in both her hands, and pulled in a long, deep breath. "What is it?" Annie moved in front of her, reached forward and placed her palm against Leah's forehead. Then she moved her fingertips to Leah's wrist. Leah knew Annie was counting her pulse. Always the nurse, always checking on her. Leah opened her eyes and smiled. "Rachel's store is a little oppressive." "That's it. Yeah, outside feels good. It does, but you scared me. You're frightened easily, maybe because you're worried my babies will come early." "Early, yes, but not today, Leah. Now, let's go and have a cup of tea." 5 minutes later, they sat down in the shop where Annie's mother worked. Leah had always been close to her own parents. 6 months after she'd married Adam, they had made the decision to move to Wisconsin. She'd been completely shocked. It was something they had talked about for several years because the cost of land was less there, but she hadn't thought they were serious. Since then, Leah's feelings toward Rebecca and Jacob had changed. Perhaps it was because her family had moved. Maybe it was the fact that Annie was expecting her own first child, or because hers were twins. Whatever the reason, in the last 2 years she'd grown incredibly close to Annie and Adam's parents. Rebecca moved toward them, calmness and joy on her face. "I was hoping you two would come in today. Let me help Charity see to the other tables, then I'll come and sit with you." Round, motherly, with gray hair peeking out from under her cap, Rebecca Weaver was a balm to Leah's soul. They ordered, and soon Rebecca was back, setting 2 mugs of tea in front of them and a plate filled with 3 kinds of cheese, crackers, and fruit. "Ma'am, we only ordered the tea, decaffeinated." "No caffeine, I remember, and the lunch is on me. I have 3 grandkinder at this table. Can't start feeding them good things too soon. I'll be back in a snap." She was gone before they could argue. "Your ma'am is the best," Leah said, reaching for a cracker and some cheese. "Our ma'am." "Right," Leah sighed, suddenly happy they had come into town. "I love this cafe." Annie stared around the room as if she didn't come in to see her mother at least twice a month, as if she was seeing it with new eyes. What's not to love? "Did I ever tell you about the time Samuel followed me in here?" "At least twice, but I don't mind hearing it again." "I thought he'd gone crazy. I'd recently returned home. Recently come back from Philadelphia. I hadn't even told my family yet about earning my nursing certification, and I was still all bound up with guilt. Samuel saw through all of those things. He saw something inside me I didn't even know existed." Annie set her package on the empty chair and reached for her tea. "Hard to believe we've both been married 2 years, Leah. Seems yesterday we were girls playing with our dolls on a summer afternoon." Leah didn't answer. Instead, she studied the crackers she'd half eaten. Should she tell Annie about all the things worrying her? She didn't want to ruin their day out, and maybe it was nothing. "Have you and Adam decided on names?" "Nah." Have you narrowed it down?" Leah shook her head, certain if she spoke now, the tears would start. Annie picked up the package and moved them so she could sit in the chair beside her rather than across from her. Leah, what's wrong? You were so happy a minute ago out on the sidewalk, and now you look miserable. Maybe it's nothing. Leah pulled her napkin out from under her silverware. Rebecca was finishing up with the last table of customers, and she did not want to be blubbering when her mother-in-law joined them. Probably it is nothing, but I'm certain you'll feel better if you talk about whatever is weighing on your heart. Leah nodded and rubbed at her eyes with the napkin. Rebecca headed toward them, and she didn't want to worry her. Later. I'll tell you later. Promise? Yeah. Everyone is served, and it should be the end of what we call our lunchtime rush. Rebecca settled into the fourth chair with her own cup of hot tea. Now show me what you purchased at the store. Leah was relieved to focus on the baby things. Thinking of the babies eased the worries in her heart. Preparing for them helped her feel as if she were doing something useful. Rebecca agreed that the diaper holder was perfect. Folks think Amish don't use disposable diapers, but I'll tell you, with my 5 children, it would have been a nice thing to have when we were going to church meetings or into town for shopping. Rachel didn't approve, Leah admitted. Oh, I wouldn't worry about what others think. It's not as if you're going to use them all the time. Cloth diapers are better overall, but there are situations when disposables will come in handy. If I have your blessing, that's good enough for me. My ma'am wouldn't give me an opinion when I wrote to her. I tried to describe the ones with the pull tabs, but when she wrote back, her comment on the subject was, "It wonders me," and nothing more. I couldn't tell if she approved or not. It's hard to understand some things from a letter, but I know your mother well, Leah. She isn't one to judge, so don't be worrying. Rebecca took a sip of her tea as she watched Charity to be sure she could handle the other 3 tables of customers. Did you pick up your fabric, Annie? Yeah, let me show you. Eddie pulled it from her bag, running her fingers over the soft cotton. Leah could imagine what it would look like once she'd finished. She could see it lying in the cradle. What a pretty color. I've always favored purples, Rebecca said. It will be perfect for the 9 patch. You're using it for Sunbonnet Sue's dresses, yeah? I thought I would. I haven't actually begun the quilt yet. They all studied their food for a moment. Leah wasn't going to broach the subject that Rebecca was dancing around. Go ahead and say it, ma'am. No, dear, I'm not about to say anything. I know I'm running a little behind, but I'm a fast quilter once I begin. I know you are. You've been busy. What with helping Belinda and Samuel. You know I can't tell him no when he asks me to go along on his visits to care for someone. Leah reached for a strawberry and popped it in her mouth. Her worries faded away as she listened to the good-natured bantering between Rebecca and Annie. Our community is so lucky to have the 2 of you. Rebecca straightened the tablecloth. I knew when you came home from Philadelphia God would use your talents in some special way. When Annie stuffed the material back into the bag, Leah felt she should encourage her. It's true, Annie. Your nursing comes in handy quite often. You were busy last week helping with the birthing of that calf over at David Hostetler's place. Birthing a calf, to think I went to nursing school. Now, Annie, God cares about the animals too, and the vet couldn't be reached in time. Rebecca was trying to hide her smile behind her teacup. Adam told me you enjoyed the birthing. Leah's heart lurched. Adam had told her something of the calf's birthing. She'd heard about it from David when he had stopped by to bring fresh milk, which he traded with them for eggs. I wouldn't say I enjoyed it. It was messy and frightening. I didn't exactly know what I was doing. Calves are bigger than babies and harder to birth in several ways. Fortunately, David and Samuel were there because another heifer was birthing at the same time. They needed an extra pair of hands. And yours were there, Rebecca added. They were, Annie grinned. He was a white-faced calf, ma'am, pretty as shoe-fly pie. So, no quilting, Leah added. I mean to start this week. Annie pushed her plate away. You'll learn to set a specific time each day or evening for your sewing, which could be difficult since your schedule is never the same. Did you sit with Bishop Levi's mother one night this week? We did. He brought her home from the hospital. There's nothing more they can do there, and it's good for her to be at the farm where at least she remembers some things. How much longer does she have? The doctors think a month or so, but Samuel says he's seen cases where the cancer can take one quickly or can cause them to linger. Samuel says there's no way to be sure. God knows best. Why did you go, Annie? Leah ran her finger around the rim of her cup. If there's nothing to be done. The bishop had to attend to a matter on the other side of our district and couldn't be back until the next morning, so we went and spent the night. It was no problem. Samuel and I took shifts. I like to go with him when I can. Once our Bopley is born, I won't be able to share those times with him anymore. Everything changes when 2 becomes 3. Rebecca smiled at them both, or 4. Leah's concerns always seemed out of proportion when she was visiting with Rebecca. Maybe she was right. Maybe at their home things would change for the better. Once you cut your fabric, you can take it with you and quilt while you're waiting. Yeah, I meant to, but then, Annie stared down at her hands. I took a nap instead 3 times last week. I know it's because of the Bopley, but I feel guilty when I sleep in the middle of the day. Be glad you can, Annie. Leah rubbed her hands along her lower back. It's been weeks since I've slept more than a few hours at a time in the evening, and not at all in the day. You girls will forget all about this as soon as you hold your newborn. Rebecca began stacking the dishes. Annie, I'd be happy to help you begin the quilt. Nah, I want to do it myself. This is my gift, my work of love for Leah. All right, Rebecca nodded in agreement. I understand. Leah stood with some difficulty and collected her packages from the store. Let's go say hello to Charity before we leave. Good idea. She can walk you girls back to your buggy. Rebecca pulled Annie, then Leah into a hug. When she did, Leah breathed in the smell of her freshly laundered cap, cinnamon from the cooking she'd been doing in the back of the shop, and a dozen other things that all cried out mother to her. Something deep inside of her wanted to stand there in Rebecca's arms to rest and not worry. We'll see you tomorrow at Annie's. Rebecca paused, reached out to touch her face, and then added, if you need me before then, you send Adam. Leah blinked and nodded. How could she have even thought of hiding anything from Rebecca Weaver? She had an instinctive way of understanding when anything was amiss among her children, and Leah was one of her children now. Though in the last month she had wondered about many things in her life, Rebecca's love was one thing she had never questioned. I'll stop for now. We'll start on chapter 3 next.